Hey everybody, David Lowry with Club Fantasci, and we are here talking with Curt Covert of Smirk Dagger Games. We're going to talk a little bit about the company and the games behind it. Curt, thanks for joining us, and welcome to the show.
Cool, thanks for having me.
All right, so you and I have known each other for a short while, just over emails and stuff and doing some review things like that.
Yep.
But I don't really know the history of Smirk Dagger Games, so why don't you give me a little bit behind what it is that got you started and where you're at today?
Sure. Well, let's see. The company's been in operation officially for 12 years. We launched on Halloween Day in, 12 years ago, 03. And I count our opening as the launch of our first game, which was Hex Hex. And obviously I'd been doing a lot of stuff, before I ever opened the company, I ever printed my first game that I could probably count as, the company being open sooner. But that was really the date. And, I think I got started like most people. It was a love of gaming, a passion for ideas. And I started actually by developing expansions to other people's games just because it was fun and I loved the game. So things like Wiz War, I sent Tom Jolly card ideas, and Dungeon Quest, I created a separate level just like they had done in one of their expansions. I created a new one for me, and it was at one point there was a game called Star Trek Red Alert, which was out for a very short time. It was essentially Disc Wars in the Star Trek universe. And somehow or other, they ended up having a conflict, and Star Wars ended up being part of their available resources. And Paramount said, no, you cannot have both. They were afraid they were going to mix the ships together, and you can't have, the Enterprise fighting the Falcons. It's wrong. So so they ended up having the Star Trek license pulled, which was a real shame because the game was great and I loved it. And I found this online board where the designers were talking to the fans of the game, and it was collectible. So we were waiting for the next expansion to come out, and it was going to be the Dominion. We were finally going to have the Defiant as a game piece, and we're like, oh my God, how can we not have that? Well, right. The designers actually released all the game files, what they were planning, just as data. And being a graphic artist at that time, I said, man, you know what? I could design these things to look exactly like the ones they produced. And not only could I play with them, but maybe I'll just release them as like a free PDF to the group of fans that were still on this board trying to support the game. Well, it ended up turning into a 2-year project. We created, I think, 2 or 3 different expansions. A lot of it was me, but then the community got involved, and we started throwing ideas together, and it was terrific. But of course, it was just for fun. And at one point, someone stopped me and said, "Dude, you just sunk 2 years into creating all this stuff, which is awesome. But why wouldn't you create your own games?"
Right.
And the honest fact was, I never even considered it. So for the first time, I started saying, well, yeah, maybe I should. This has been fun. I really enjoyed it. I've always liked, adding stuff to people's games. And so I started the thought of like, well, I'm going to create my own. Well, there's a huge difference between building on the genius of others and
right.
creating something from scratch. And so I learned very quickly with my first 3 games, which looked beautiful because I'm a graphic artist, but they were just the worst games ever. It was like playing 4-player solitaire. It just terrible. As good as even the themes were. So I finally was cradling my head. I was like, well, maybe this is not for me. Maybe it's not to be. But I said, all right, you know what? In my day job, I'm also a marketer. Let's just, for the moment, take a look at the marketplace. What's out there? What could I bring that someone else doesn't already bring? What's my special addition to the hobby? And so I started looking at the mission statements of different game companies, and I don't know how many I saw that were, when you distill it down, was, we make fun games for the whole family or for everyone, or, And I was like, well, that's not much of a mission statement. You can't really stand out with that.
Right.
But there were a few companies out there that did. They kind of planted a flag. So Looney Labs has a very definite culture around it. At that time, James Ernest had the Cheap Ass Games titles out. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. He's got a whole proposition. It's just like, I stand for fun, inexpensive games. You bring your own parts. I was like, that's a real platform. He's standing out from all the competition by being about something. And again, I was like, what is it that I love that I can bring? Now, honestly, I got into the whole hobby because of Tom Jolly's Wiz War. I absolutely love that game and the whole backstabby nature of it and everything else.
Right.
And I was like, you know what? If I really analyze what I love about games, I love Take That games because I think it's funny. I think it's funny to you see people planning all their moves and what they're going to do, and then you just go, meh. And it's funny, and then you laugh, and they're like, it's very emotional. They're like, no! And it's all those emotional highs and lows. To me, that's the social aspect of gaming that I just love. I was like, all right, you know what? If that's what you love, that's what you should build. And so I came up with the name of the company before I even came up with my first game. And so Smirk Dagger Games was born of this idea that I would create that moment in all my games where, you could just line them up in your sights, get all excited, that little smirk comes to your face just before you let them have it with the dagger. And that's really what it was all about. So it's like, all right, so now that I have this kind of platform where I'm going to plant my flag, I'm going to stand out from any other company. Now I need a game. What is the simplest, cleanest game I can think of that gets a lot of social interaction? So different than the first things that I created. That has that backstabby, take that nature. And is, again, it's simple. It's quick to get into and gets people excited. And once I had set that mission for myself, my first game actually, and I've worked on those other games for a year and a half. This one created itself in about 2 weeks, and that was Hex Hex. Huh. Which, if you know the game, it's essentially a very mean-spirited hot potato game if you boil it right down to the mechanics. And so you're passing around a hex, and every card you play is either a backstabbing move or a way to attack someone by shoving the hex off to someone else. But there's lots of twists and turns, and it is highly volatile, highly chaotic, constant turns of fortune. And so I was like, I kind of like it. I started playing with friends and family, and they were enjoying it. Good sign. And I said, all right, proof is in the pudding. You have to put it out in the public. I started going to conventions, and it evolved a little bit. But the core of the game was really there. And I talked to a couple of reviewers, and they're like, you know what, there's something here. You should really, think about it. I took a lot of input, and I crafted it over the course of the next year. And I still hadn't decided whether I was even going to print it. At one point, a retailer who I met at one of my conventions ended up saying, hey, look, I'm going to be at Gen Con this year. We actually are looking for ways to create interest and traffic in our booth because we're selling games that, are already out there. We want to have a traffic driver to our site. Why don't you come and demo your game and maybe sell a couple copies? Great. I'd never been to Gen Con before. And when I got there, and it was this sea of people, I was like, oh my God, I couldn't even believe it. I had hand printed about 100 copies of Hex Hex, and I printed it on parchment paper at Kinko's. It was just like this, kind of brown parchment, Xerox black ink, cut square corners, and I put it into a plastic box. And I was like, I don't know, what I'll charge $12 for it. And even without a banner, a presence, anything, I was just this little tiny, card table at a retailer's booth. I sold almost all 100 copies.
Wow.
Wow, I might actually have something here. And it was really exciting. So I started saying, well, okay, maybe I gotta bite the bullet. Now, Kickstarter didn't exist at that point. So I had to have the very hard conversation with my wife. I'm thinking about printing this game. To do it, I'm gonna have to put a second mortgage on the house. What do you think about that?
Are you still married?
I'm still married. She's very loving and very patient. So, but yeah, so I ended up deciding to go ahead, not knowing much about the industry. And honestly, I met a lot of great people in the industry. I talked to the folks at Looney Labs, and I talked to, really anyone who would talk to me that could give me advice. And most of them said, don't do it. Not because of my game, but because the industry was at that time and still is so hard. It's not a permission to print money. It's a very difficult business to get into and maintain yourself in. And they say that, like I say that to people, because they know if they can dissuade you, it was probably best that they did. And if you can't be dissuaded, you probably have what it takes to survive. So
they didn't want the competition.
Oh no, it wasn't even about the competition. I have to say, I found that the gaming industry and the other game companies, sure, our products may compete for shelf space or other things, but I have never felt that the other companies out there felt like I was a threat, nor was I threatened by them. There was pretty much room for everyone, and there was a lot of help and support that I found. And so for the same reason, I offer that to people who come to me and say, hey, listen, I have an idea. Can you tell me about, how to get things started? And I constantly do that for people. It's just, it's my way of paying back for what I got.
Right.
Yeah.
So now you've got Hex Hex out on the market. It's doing really well. Once you got it out there, what happened to the game?
Well, interestingly enough, when I first printed it, it sat in my warehouse for 6 months because I didn't have distribution. And I didn't have a chance to even talk to distributors or retailers really until the Gamma Trade Show, which was, all the way in March at that point. So I started sitting on a lot of product and getting very, very nervous with all this, this money that I just spent. So while I was waiting for that show to make a big impact and talk to a lot of people, I started cold calling people, like Spencer's Gifts, like Hot Topic, like other places. Now, by and large, you cannot just cold call someone and actually hope to speak with them, rather, or even, greater than that, hope to sell in a game from an unknown.
Right.
But I did. Spencer's Gift ended up buying half the print run.
Wow.
They bought, and I was stupid. I printed 5,000 copies, again, without distribution.
Right.
Because I didn't really know better. And so they bought 2,500 copies. They ended up, I think, thinking it was more of a tarot deck because it was in the tarot section of the store. And they didn't ask for returnability. So once they had them, they paid me and they weren't going to ask for money back. And that, not only did it pay for the print run, it probably saved my company from what could have been a really early demise. That said, by the time I got to Gamma, I had already talked to Aldo over at Impressions, who's a consolidator of small press games. He had heard about me, and he contacted me beforehand and said, hey, listen, the benefit of working with me is that if you do it yourself, you're going to have to sell your game to each distributor across the globe individually. And with one game, they may or may not take you. They may or may not be interested. Whereas if I take you on, you'll be a line item with all my other clients, and you'll be instantly distributed worldwide overnight. I was like, well, that seems worthwhile. And so that's what I did. And when I went to Gamma that year, I could say to every retailer, every distributor, we're fully distributed worldwide. anyone you want to deal with, you can get our game. And that, quite honestly, that got us on the track to really move forward. And then it was a matter of, okay, now what? I've got one game, now I need more.
Right. So now it says on here, though, that the game was nominated for a couple different awards.
Yeah, like I said, it did pretty darn well. It was really simple in theme. Like I said, it's kind of hot potato, but I think really what it came down to was that I have a design philosophy where I'm less mathy about my designs. I am really looking for the emotional impact of the game. So I will funnel behavior to elicit emotional responses.
Right.
And I'll add things that I know are going to add to that kind of fun, boisterous nature. So, for example, one of the things in Hex Hex is there's a card actually called Hex Hex, where when it gets played, it curses the entire deck. Your response, your response to that is you drop your entire hand and you throw your hands in the air, and the last one up loses major points. Well, imagine that you were sitting, and again, back to that original table at Gen Con, my very first year, you're hearing people laugh and curse at each other and throw their hands up in the air, and we're creating a scene that clearly people were like into. Well, once you engage someone's emotions, you're in like that golden zone of gaming. And some people love games that are all about outwit, outperform. They're very math kind of thinky games. But some games are like a little bit more party style, a little bit more casual, a little bit more involved, and that's where this kind of lives. And I think because of some of the things that I did and designed into the game to elicit those responses, that's why the game got recognized really right out of the gate.
Well, that's awesome. That's a great story. So from there, let's talk a little bit about what is the flagship product really right now of Smirk and Dagger, and that's Cutthroat Caverns.
Yes.
What is that a game about?
So Cutthroat Caverns is a cooperative backstabbing game in a dungeon. And you really do have to do both well. Yes.
Cooperative backstabbing.
Exactly.
I love that.
And truly, just like the box says, you really have to do both things well, because if you don't work together in this game, and it's a dungeon crawl game, if you don't work together, the monsters that you face are significantly nasty, that they're going to overwhelm the party and very likely kill everyone, so there'll be no winner. However, it's a game about kill stealing in the end. So if you don't mess with other people, if you don't trip them and edge them out of the way to get your blow in and not theirs, you're never going to win either. And that's the delicate balance. If you spend all your time really screwing with each other, the creatures live longer, they do more damage, and you all get closer to death.
Right.
But because you have to make sure that you land that killing blow, you're going to do whatever it takes to make sure, opportunistically, that you get that blow in. And that is that cooperative backstabbing balance.
Right. That's where the strategy comes in.
Yeah.
Now, how long has Cutthroat's been out?
Cutthroat first released in 2007 and has since expanded like crazy. I mean, the base game itself only has like 25 creatures, but now the game hosts well over 100, like 120 different creatures. And they got replayability. Yeah, they got harder and harder as each set was released, because people wanted more threat of death in there. Right. We added some interesting mechanics along the way that, quite honestly, by the time Relics and Ruin came out, which was our second expansion, we had an idea for an event deck that, if I had really thought of it back when I released the game, it would have been in the base game. But we hadn't even thought of it. So now to think of playing it without that, which it adds so much additional variety and replay, and it changes the mechanics so much, I miss it when it's not there.
Right.
But the core of the game has not really gotten a lot more complicated. And it really is a about what you are willing to do to other players to win and still keep yourself alive, because you need them through most of the game to be alive and helping you. But at the end, it really is a free-for-all.
Now, one of the things I love about this is, you know, you being a marketer, me being a marketer, I'm all about artwork and presentation and all those kinds of things. And I felt like the cover on this captured the essence of the game, and the artwork is really good. And I just realized it's the same guy that works with you. I didn't realize he was also the artist on that game. But, you know, I think that is a really neat selling point to the game, but also was very intriguing. When you look at this on the shelf, you automatically go, what is that?
Yeah.
You know, it's real good artwork on that game. So anybody who hasn't seen this, I know Shut Up and Sit Down just did a review, but not too long ago. And it was a stellar review. So if anybody watching this has not played this game, go check out that review. And
yeah, you're right.
Now, how many expansion titles is this?
Go ahead.
How many expansions?
Oh, there are currently 4. And yeah, Justin Brunetto was the designer of that cover art. And then I worked with Tim Woolweber, who quite honestly is a Disney artist, believe it or not. He's a sculptor at Disney Studios in Burbank, and he had a webcomic as well. And you'll notice that there is just a little bit of Disney influence in those characters. What's interesting about you'll notice there's a huge disparity between the characters and the monsters. The characters are a little bit cartoony. They look lighter, a little bit more fun. And although you see all the distrust in their eyes, and all that's intentional, because I wanted to communicate that, yeah, you know what? This game is a lark. This is not a serious dungeon. But at the same time, all the creatures in the game had to look nasty, like they were going to rip your heart out, because the threat level had to be palpable. You had to feel like, guys, if we don't work together, this is going to end badly. And so that disparity is part of the design and part of the thematic. Yeah. All
right, so that game is that's a 3-6 player game, lasts about an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good game night game right there. Now, are there any additional plans to keep expanding on that particular title?
There are, in fact. We are currently working on expansion number 5. Expansion number 4 was probably 2 years ago now, and for the very first time we had introduced a real way that characters could have unique abilities, different life totals, and honestly, I stayed away from that for years because so often in games that have different character abilities, sometimes you'll hear like, oh, you know what? It's not balanced well. Hey, if I can't be the dwarf, I don't even want to play. And I didn't want that to even come in and factor into this game. So so the base game and all the way through, we really kept it as less about the characters, more about what you as a player are willing to do. But fans always wanted it. So we ended up finally having these now 12 set characters with different abilities. But let's say people thought they were unbalanced. Cool. Flip them all over, and we let those same abilities as a whole pool to be drafted. So now you can customize your characters and set it new every different game. And for me, that was the thing that made it worth doing. In Expansion 5, though, we are really focusing on a particular type of encounter. Some of the really, just big boss monsters are those called the incarnations. So the incarnation of spite, the incarnation of hate. And for whatever reason, those seem to be the ones that people fear the most because they just get built really well, and they're a lot of fun to play. So we decided that what if we dedicated an entire expansion to a whole new set of incarnations, It has even a choose your own path adventure book, like we did in Tombs and Tomes. There'll be a new one of those books. A couple new wrinkles in the rules as well, and a whole bunch of new relics that are themed on the powers of those incarnations. So what would it be like to hold the power of death, to hold the power of disease, and have those as lasting effects that you can gain through fighting the monsters.
Right. Let's move on to the new game you got coming out here on June 8th.
Yes.
Which Nevermore. And for those watching, I want to just give them, as they can see behind me, there's plenty of Smirk and Dagger on the game shelf here. But I really wanted to bring this up because the artwork that you put on a lot of your games is just flat out amazing. And I think people need to take a look at this and just get an idea what this box looks like real quick. But the game's called Nevermore, so why don't you give us the 2-minute rundown on that real quick?
Sure. Nevermore is it's a casual style card drafting game, and thematically, it's an arcane battle where falling as one of the players will transform you into a raven. So it's player transformation, not player elimination, and it supposes how Poe's raven might have come to be eons before, and is now this human doomed to walk the earth in shadow, bringing doom to others. Well, so how did that happen? And this wizardly battle of light and shadow is exactly how that happens. So if you fall during the game, you become a raven, and you are now in the game, bringing doom to others and struggling to regain your humanity so you can win, because you can't win as a raven. So it's transformation that is meaningful. So if you knock someone out, it means something, but they're not really out. They are still affecting the rest of the game. Strategy of play completely changes for those players, and there is a way for them to get back in and win. And that was really compelling to me.
What, just so people understand, because you are such a big fan of stab people in the back, what is that? How does that mechanic really work in this game?
Well, it starts with the game's inspiration, quite honestly. Do you play poker at all?
Absolutely, sure.
Okay. So I'm not really much of a fan of Hold'em. I love dealer's choice games. Probably not a big surprise. I play sometimes with people who are a little bit more serious poker players than I am. And so once per night, and I get together with these guys like once a month, I will call a game of Pass the Trash, which infuriates most poker players because it completely changes the game. You know, what's considered a high hand also changes, because the whole point of Pass the Trash is you get 5 cards, and as much as you love those cards, you got to immediately pass 3 of them away. And you know they're going to send you the worst garbage they possibly can. So you have to change how you think about what a best hand is. You might try to collect 4s because people are just going to pass you garbage cards. And if you get 3 of a kind, that's a winning hand. So so I love to throw that game in at least once. And driving home one night, I was like, well, you know, interesting thing about that game, I like it because it's kind of backstabby, but you're only trying to get one best hand, the best hand at the table. What if there were 5 best hands at the table? How would that change strategy? What would that mean in terms of how you draft cards, what you're collecting, and what would those best hands mean? And I started crafting an idea about, well, if you have the most of a given suit, you gain the power of that suit. And, so the power to attack, the power to heal, the power to draw light magic cards, which would be beneficial to you, the power to gain victory points, or what if we threw a poison card in there? The Raven. So now you're trying to pass off the ravens, because if you hold any ravens, they actually force you to discard scoring cards. However, if you shoot the moon and you collect 5 of them, you turn everything around on everyone. You gain victory points, you're getting dark magic cards and all kinds of things. Now, these shadow magic cards are the, apart from the fact that you're sending them cards that are going to annoy them, because you have to manage what you send them as much as you are what you're trying to collect. So that's the first kind of backstabby thing. The shadow cards are the second. Lots of terrible effects happen when you start playing those on players. And those you get either by having 5 ravens in your hand, or sometimes you'll go for it and you'll just miss. And once you have to sacrifice all your good cards, you might have leftover ravens at the end. And those you gain shadow magics for. It sets up a really interesting dynamic where some people are really focused on trying to attack people, make sure they're healing themselves, all sorts of things. But you just have to constantly be aware of what you're passing and what you're gaining and balance it all.
So that's coming out on June 8th to the local retailers, right?
That's
so
correct.
Keep your eye out for that. That's Nevermore, coming June 8th. Now let's move on to Student Bodies, which is also a newer title that you guys that come out within the last year, and it's right up there. Tell us about this, because this to me was a little bit different than anything I'd seen from you before. It's got the backstabbiness, but it has kind of a classic old school feel to it at the same time.
Interesting. Well, so the first thing to say about it is that this is one of the 2 games in my line that I did not design myself. So partly that may explain some of it, but there was a lot of when these guys showed me the game, and it's the Angry Ducks Games that designed it.
Okay.
I absolutely fell in love with it. It had all the nastiness that I would want in a zombie game. And I, quite honestly, given the absolute glut of zombie games on the market, when I was looking at printing this thing, I said, you know what? I probably shouldn't print it. But my God, I love it so much. I love the twist that it has. So, one, it's in a high school. The players start already bitten. They're already infected. And that's usually where games end. Well, here, this is where the game begins. And what it really means is that they could change at any time. You can't trust anybody anymore. So that being the case, you're trying to run down the hall of the school, find an antidote in the lab, and then get back out the door of the school and lock it behind you because you can't trust anybody. So only one player is going to be leaving and living. Everyone else and everything on the board is an enemy. Plus, there are no guns, there's no axes. It's a high school. You're not going to find that stuff. So you're going to have to make do with what you can find. A janitor's mop, a fire extinguisher, whatever, a tuba. And so there is a lot of levity in it, which is why, it's got that kind of classical comic book feel. And I found Brett Parsons, who's just amazing as a comic book artist. He did all the art, and but at the same time, what I truly loved about the game was that it creates, unlike a lot of zombie games that I have played, this constant sense of dread. You start moving down the hallway, and you start looking back, knowing that you've got to go back through all these zombies. You're like, there is no way I'm going to live. And for some people, that's true. But somehow, usually at least one person is able to kind of sneak their way through. The beautiful part, too, though, is that if you die before you get an antidote, you rise as a smart zombie. So while it's a really nasty, non-cooperative game as a human player, once you rise as a zombie, you join the game with a new goal to kill everybody else. So you can have a cooperative zombie win.
Right.
Or a single human win.
I find this is kind of like a recurring theme a little bit here with this and Nevermore. Is you can be put into a different state of being. Your character flips the script, which is always a kind of an interesting take on the game. What I kind of liked about it is that when I got it and I opened it up, it was like bringing back a more classic look, not the artwork, just the feel of the games with the standees and the board and whatever. And it was kind of an interesting take, and it really doesn't play like any other zombie game. So that was really kind of cool. And even though it's backstabby, it's fun backstabby.
Yes.
No, this is not. I didn't feel like this was one of those games, at least at this point when we played it so far, where anybody was going to get mad at you. Because you can't strategize that far ahead. This is a free for all, and you're trucking to get down to that lab and get an antidote and get out, and that's all there is to it.
It's interesting. My games, because they are take that games, are more polarizing than a lot, and I accept that. Some people are going to really love that about me. Some people are going to hate that about my games. But by and large, I think you're right. Most times, even with all the nasty stuff that I try to build in, all the emotional highs and lows that I'm actually seeking to elicit from people, when you sit down to play most of my games, you're kind of entering into a contract.
Right.
You're saying, you know what? I know we're all here to do nasty things to each other, and we kind of agree that's going to happen. So when it happens, it's not a surprise.
Right.
So we can all kind of laugh about it. Whereas if, it's a minor element in someone's game, and it really is a surprise when, dude, I thought we were really, working together on this. This is like a true betrayal, you to me, not like in the game, but you and me.
Right.
It doesn't really happen that way. It's part of the experience of playing the game, and I think for that reason, people accept it and laugh it off. Yeah,
I think this is like, I always kind of looked at your games like, for those people who don't like backstabbing games but are willing to give one a try, these are ones you want to bring out and give them a try, because you're not totally ruining somebody's well thought out strategy of a game, and they can get into a little bit more and have fun with it and laugh it off and that kind of stuff. And I really like that feel. When we play it was just a couple months ago, I guess, and we played a different game that was backstabby, and one person just went irate over the fact that somebody had backstabbed over just one move and totally took him out of the game for the rest of the game. And I don't feel like your game should do that, because it doesn't set up that kind of expectation of setting that far ahead of strategy most of the time, that somebody backstabbing you is going to ruin it all.
Correct.
If something happens to you, and you have one bad round, you're not out.
Yeah, and I think that's an important part of the design phase is, if I had something that was overstepping, that was really going to cause someone to table flip, and not that some people haven't gotten upset with Cutthroat Caverns or things, it does happen.
Right.
But by and large, I try to filter out both cards or mechanics that really do lead to lasting hard feelings, because that's not the goal. The smirk is just as important as the dagger.
Right. All right, so Student Bodies is out now. People can find that in their local retailers, and that is, that's kind of an essential, I think, for any zombie lover, really. So take a look at that one. And the last game I want to talk about today so far, and this one actually won an award from us last year. In last year's War Game Awards is Dread Curse, and it won the Best Artwork Award. So let me show people again. And this is a fabulous game. The artwork is amazing, and all the artwork on the inside looks just like the cover. Oops, it's upside down. But just so people get an idea of the quality of and the level of art that Smirk and Dagger is putting out there, because it really is stellar.
Yeah.
I think.
Actually, hold that box a second. Grab that box a second.
Okay.
All right. Take it just tip it out towards the edge. Let's see the side of the box with the girl pirate.
Oh.
That is the self-portrait of the illustrator, Lindsay Look.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And the pirate on the cover, while it may look like Jeffrey Rush a bit, that is in fact a portrait of her dad. Makes it look like a pirate.
Wow. Yeah, he definitely has the Jeffrey Rush look to him a little bit, but I just really felt like when you sent this to me and we were looking at best artwork. I mean, today's games are, the level of production is skyrocketed.
Oh,
So to stay up there is always quite the feat. But your games, especially as of late, the artwork has just been outstanding, and I just love pulling these out and people looking at them or whatever. So anyway, that's the 2013 Club Fantasci Best Artwork Game of the Year right there, folks.
Yep. Well, interesting story about the art and how it's developed over time. Obviously, when I first started, and without the benefit of Kickstarter and having to fund everything myself, quite honestly, even Hex Hex. Hex Hex is an extremely graphic game, meaning there are no illustrations. But when I first conceived of that game, I was a big Magic the Gathering fan. I wanted to have all those spells in that game have gorgeous artwork all over them.
Right.
I couldn't afford that. So because I couldn't afford it, I had to think about other options. And so I went with a really heavily graphic look, give it an arcane feeling. So I said, you know what? I haven't seen any, at that time, any just flat black cards on the face. And I put gold, alchemist style icons on it. And it was a really kind of a interesting look that kind of pulls you in.
Right.
But it's not the look I would have gone for. Even Cutthroat Caverns, if I redid that game now, it probably would look a lot more like my more recent games. But, as my company grew, I was able to invest a little bit more in each of the games because I had more that I could actually invest safely in it.
Right.
Dread Curse, by the way, was one of my higher budgeted art projects. I really decided that, you know what, especially as the market gets more and more crowded, there are more and more options every month of games as they now start coming out of Kickstarter and everywhere else. It's more and more important, even for marketing purposes. Your box cover is your best advertisement anywhere.
Right. Absolutely.
Yep. So so I started really saying, you know what, given the marketplace, I need to up the game. And so I started really seeking out some really talented folks to help put that look on the box. Happily, I happen to be, I have a big art background. So while I'm not capable of the art that these guys are doing, I'm pretty involved in helping envision and helping them get there. Tell them what I want, and then they bring it to life in ways that I couldn't even imagine.
Right. So let's talk about the game a little bit, because this is another great big group game. And I know a lot of people are familiar with Masquerade, and this is along that same kind of line, but with a little more gameplay to it, a little more that you can do. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I think this is kind of under the radar for most people. They don't really know about it. They haven't heard about it. And if they love games that have variable characters with, powers and things like that, or roles, character roles, this is something they need to look at. So tell them a little bit about how this game works.
Sure. Well, Dread Curse is obviously a pirate game, and it puts players in the variable roles of different pirates on the ship, trying to divvy up the day's booty. So there's an actual physical cloth bag filled with doubloons, and they are ranked from 1 to 5. So obviously a 5 is much more valuable. And through the gameplay, you are trying to draw coins out of the bag and steal it from other players to get your stash the biggest by the end of the game, which is all well and good, but you're also trying to avoid the cursed treasure. There are 2 black spot coins in the bag. It's a push your luck game, because at some point, and it can be really any time, the game can suddenly end. And if you are holding one of the black spots, when it does end, it doesn't matter how much gold you ended up with, you are done. You're out.
Right.
So it's a matter of deciding which pirate, and they all have different abilities, which pirate is more advantageous for you, given your current state right now. And you're trying to vie for those different abilities throughout the game. And what I loved about the game, and Stuart Sist's design, again, this is one that I did not invent myself, but I worked with him on to bring a little bit more backstabbiness to it. The beautiful thing he brought me was almost a bidding system. And I say almost because you don't actually lose your coins in the bidding system. You have a stash of gold, and you have to put forward 1 or 2 pieces of gold. And when you reveal them to the rest of the pirates, whoever has the highest total will be captain. And the captain, he draws the most, he gets rich quickest. So at the beginning of the game, that's really great. The problem is, while I didn't give away those coins by flipping them over and letting you see them, if you show me 2 5s, I'm going to remember that come the steal phase. I'm probably stealing from your stash rather than someone else. So right. It's a matter of how much information are you willing to give out. And of course, you might be stuck with a black spot. You might need the cook or the first mate that is going to help you get rid of the black spot, either by, instead of stealing a coin, you're going to give it to another pirate, or maybe the cook is going to slip it back into the bag while, after he's done stealing from another player. All kinds of great fun back and forth. And of course, when Stuart first presented to me, it was a little bit nicer. Even the pirates looked friendlier. They were photographs of his friends. He's a cosplay guy and a Ren Fair guy, and they actually have a pirate ship, and all his friends man the pirate ship, so they're all pictures of his friends. But they all looked heroic. And I was like, well, for Smirk and Dagger Games, these pirates have to be pretty nasty looking. So I ended up putting into the game, with his permission, I shared with him my vision, and I wanted some kind of nasty cards, some take that cards into the game. So I crafted a whole bunch of additional mechanics, showed it to him, and he's like, you know what? I absolutely love what you've done with the game. Yes, let's go ahead and do it. So that's really the genesis of how it became to be where it is.
All right. Now, I just want to add in there to the people watching, if you haven't played this, and don't draw too much from my comparison earlier, because there is a lot more to this game than the luck of Masquerade, where you're randomly trying to pick and bluff somebody out of something. You are strategically trying to figure out what character card you need to get next to be able to gain or lose things in your treasure bag. So there's a little more to it than that, and it is a ton of fun. So definitely check it out. I think it retails for $30, right?
That's correct. And what's nice too about it is it plays from 3 to 8 players. So if you've got a big group of players, there's only a handful of games you can really pull out for 8 players. And this one scales beautifully no matter how many you have.
Yeah, awesome. All right. So, Curt, let's talk a little bit about where people can check these out. I know you're going to be at Gen Con.
Yep.
Have they given you a booth number yet or anything like that? Have you taken care of all that junk?
They have, and I'm going to misquote it. I think it might be 1732. But in any case, you're not going to be able to miss it this year because I've gone with the biggest booth I've ever done. It is a big 20 by 20 end cap. And we're going to have a good 17 people there working the booth and demoing games. It should be really exciting this year.
Awesome. So you can check them out there. As far as other conventions, you're going to be doing local stuff. What area of the country are you in for people that might be looking at local cons?
I'm in the Northeast kind of tri-state area. So I live in Connecticut. We go down to New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts. So that's kind of where I roam.
All right. So people watching the video, if you're up there, look for Curt out at the booths or Justin, whoever will be manning those booths. Curt, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and explain a little bit about the company and some of the games that you have to offer. For those watching, Curt and I will do a series starting in a week or two covering various topics of the industry in and of itself that will title a different thing. But so stay tuned for that. And Curt, again, thanks for taking the time to do this and sharing your games.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, everybody. You can check out Smirk and Dagger Games at smirkanddaggergames.com. And obviously, they have a Facebook and a Twitter account. I don't know if you have a Google Plus page. I know you have a personal Google Plus page.
I don't think we do, actually. Yeah.
Okay. And, I'm David Lowry with Club Fantasci. Check us out at clubfantasci.com. Please make sure you share the interview, talk about it, and help spread the word about Smirk and Dagger Games. Thank you for watching, and game on.
So long.